everyone. For those who don't know, this is Culture Meets Money, where we talk everything from culture to money to ownership. Um, as you probably, I know you got a chance to see our last session with Stephen. So as I always say, I do no justice to all our amazing. So please take the time to introduce.
Hi, everyone. My name is Atiya Brown. I am the owner of the Savvy Accountant Firm, which is a full-service CPA practice where we specialize in all things tax. So I have an affinity for taxes and I love taxes, and I want to basically teach my community how to build wealth by understanding the tax code.
Love it. So let's just jump into it. Tell me, what was it about Texas that made you want it? Because like finances like a thing, but we are definitely, even as a culture, coming more around to the conversation of money. But taxes is kind of like in its own little bracket by itself. Like no one wants to touch it unless we get like a tax refund.
Yeah.
What was it about taxes that said, this is what I'm going to specialize in and help people out?
So it's funny because I actually didn't know I was going to do accounting at all until I got to university. And then I had a teacher who was a CPA, and she was like, I want you to try out for this team. And what it was a team to represent my school across the country. And it was a tax competition. And so I tried out and I made the team. And what it is, it's a case competition. You get a case, you get 3 hours to solve it, and then you have to present it to a board. And then, so we came in third in our first year. And that's when I realized that I love taxes because every situation is different, and like you can solve different things by just understanding the tax code, and they can be applied different ways. So I just loved the puzzle, putting together the puzzle of it. And that's really how my love for taxes came about. Before that, I never really thought about taxes or anything. But yeah, when I realized that, oh, I can take this and save money by just changing these different things for this different person. So that's really where my love for taxes came in.
University, join a team, fall in love with taxes, and we're going to get deeper into it. But is there, just to kind of even start jumping into that, is there something about taxes that excites you? Is it working with like entrepreneurs? Is it working with like the everyday person? Like, what is it? What is that thing about taxes in that area of taxes that excite you?
Yeah, so it's really working with small business owners who look like me. Because when I started realizing what taxes were, that it's really just codification laws written into the book that is going to help you save money. When a lot of people that look like me don't understand taxes, taxes make them scared, they get stressed out, they get nervous. And so really just giving that information to let you know that this is actually the law. You're able to do this. It might sound absurd, but it's something that was written into the law that you can apply to your situation. So really bringing it to my community so that they understand that these things apply to them. And without understanding it, they wouldn't know that it was there.
So talk about small businesses, in particular black and brown or black small business owners. One thing that, I think that even with the pandemic, when the PPP loans was happening, we realized how many people were commingling their funds and they weren't able to apply. And then once on the other side of that, we've seen people who have applied for their business, but they file the incorrect way. They'll file like the C Corp when there's like, you talk about the taxes around how and why the importance of filing as a small business owner and how the tax plays a role in that.
Yeah. So when it comes to your taxes as a small business owner, you actually need to realize that your business entity structure is going to dictate how your taxes are paid, what you pay in taxes, the additional taxes, because a lot of times people hear the word tax and they assume income tax, but we pay a lot of taxes. We have sales tax, we have payroll tax, we have excise tax, we have self-employment tax. There are a lot of taxes that go into the word taxes. And so figuring out where you fall, like where your business falls, is going to dictate what you actually have to pay in taxes. And that actually has to deal with your tax return. What tax return are you going to be filing? You have to know that, a lot of people talk about LLCs, and then a lot of people are talking about S corps, but you need to realize that those are two different returns, and you're going to need to make sure that you understand what your entity is so that you know what compliance you have when it comes to your taxes. And we saw that with the whole COVID and PPP relief, that a lot of people didn't have compliance. So they weren't filing their taxes. And in order to get a lot of the relief, you had to file tax returns. So they were scrambling to get tax returns filed, and some of them were filing incorrect returns. So it's really just understanding. And when it comes to taxes, a lot of times getting organized is going to be one of your saving graces. And I know that organization is difficult for a lot of people, but when it comes to taxes, one of the main reasons that you overpay on your taxes is because you're not organized. And if you're not organized, then you don't know what you should be reporting. So then you tend to overreport, and then you overpay on your taxes.
Do you have any tools or any advice on how to stay better organized?
Yes. So I like to tell people that you need to work with someone, if it's not your strong point, that's somebody that's going to be their strong point. So organization, making sure that you're not commingling. What commingling is, as you mentioned before, it's, taking your personal and your business, making and mixing them together. And the bad side of this is that you're telling everybody that you don't have a separation between you and the business. So this comes into play if litigation comes into play, if you have to get sued or if you want to sue. It's basically telling people, well, I don't think I'm separate from the business. So everything that you see here is open for you to sue. And you don't want that. So you want to make sure you're not commingling. So one of the tips I give people is to set up your separate accounts for the business from the personal, and make sure everything for the business is running through the business accounts. Don't start mixing things up. Make sure that you understand that what's for the business is for the business, what's for the person is for the person. And so that's the biggest issue, is to stop commingling as soon as possible. Obviously, you can't go back and change what happened in the past. But as soon as you start and you want to start doing things the right way, stop commingling right away and have the separate accounts set up.
Love that. So would you recommend things like QuickBooks, or is there any tool that you kind of use or recommend that people use to
Yep.
kind of stay in line?
Yes. And when it comes to being organized, making sure that your financials are being set up. So QuickBooks is, like I like to tell people, QuickBooks is the most known, but QuickBooks was created for accountants by accountants. So it's going to be really accountant heavy. It's going to be a self-balancing tool. So if you're not aware of what your transactions are supposed to be doing, it's going to balance, but it might be wrong. So you can get a loan, but that income is going to come in. That might be reported as revenue if you don't know what you're doing. And then you're going to pay taxes on it, but it's a loan. You shouldn't be paying taxes on a loan. So understanding that your accounting software is going to do just how you set it up. So you need to make sure you understand how to set it up. So cloud-based accounting is where you want to be, especially in this day and age. So I do recommend Xero for a lot of DIYers. Xero, it's Xero, and what it does is, it's a competitor to QuickBooks, but I find it's more user-friendly. So if you're a DIYer, it's going to be language that you understand. So it's, who did you pay? What did you pay? So it just makes it a little bit more easy for the end user. QuickBooks is a great software. I use it in my practice, but again, it was created for accountants by accountants. So it's going to have journal entries. It's going to have debits and credits. You're going to need to know kind of how that works in order for you to reconcile your QuickBooks. So I do recommend that. Xero is a more user-friendly software, but it does the same thing. The purpose is that you want it to be cloud-based, so that you can have all your transactions connected automatically, and you can download your reports and all of that happening. But you want to make sure that you have some kind of accounting software in place, because I like to tell people all the time, we want to save you on your taxes. We have a goal to save our community $1 billion. But one of the easiest ways that you guys are actually overpaying on your taxes is because you don't know the numbers and you don't understand the numbers. And by not understanding the numbers, you're like, chances are 9 out of 10 times you're overpaying on your taxes.
Wow. Wow. So with that, someone who is either trying to be on the right path or someone who is new, when a new entrepreneur comes to you and or a current entrepreneur who says, I need to get everything in line, what is that first bit of advice that you give?
Yeah. So the first bit of advice is, yay that you decided to come and get some advice from a professional, because a lot of times you're good at what you're good at. Like, you're good at your business and you're running that. But when it comes to the finances, a lot of times people put it on the back burner, but it really, like 82% of businesses fail within the first 5 years because their cash flow is not managed properly. They don't understand what the ins and outs of the business are. So while they're good at their thing and they ignore the finance side, they can actually be the detriment to their business. And so kudos to reaching out to speaking with someone. The first thing we want to do is make sure we get on track. So we talked about organization. We talked about connecting your accounts, making sure your accounts are set up. We want to make sure that you have a system in place that's going to work for you. So what that means is, while we talked about QuickBooks, if you are an Excel person, Excel based software still works. If that's how you're going to know that you're going to do the job, then you should probably stick with what you're going to do, because I can tell you all of the best softwares, but if you don't implement them, if you don't actually stick to it, then it's not going to get done. It's going to discourage you and you're not going to do it. So I like to tell people to know your strengths and know how you work best, and look for that compliment when you're looking to work with someone.
Love that. So new entrepreneur or current entrepreneur changing their ways, but outside of so we gave the advice. Now on the other side of that, outside of the mistakes we talked about prior that leads to overspending, what are some other mistakes that you see entrepreneurs make when it comes to taxes?
Yeah. So when it comes to taxes, not knowing your numbers is going to be one of the major mistakes. Not keeping track of your expenses. So I like to tell people that when you look at things from a parallel perspective, the government's concern is your revenues, right? And a lot of us nowadays, we're like, I made 6 figures, I made 7 figures. That's great. But what did you spend in order to generate that income? Because the expense side is your onus. The government is not going to say, oh, you made $1 million, but didn't you spend 800,000 to make that million? Like, they're not going to remind you that you spent money to make this money. And so you need to make sure that you're keeping track of your expenses, your deductions, everything that you are spending to run the business, because that's going to be a direct correlation to how your taxes are calculated. So making sure that you have a system in place to track your expenses, to make sure that you're not missing any expenses. And I like to tell people, you always think that you're going to remember, but you're not going to remember. Like, 1 month is going to pass, then 1 quarter is going to pass. And then by the time the end of the year comes, you're going to be like, did I spend that on this? Did I spend that? That's why you want to have a system in place where you are looking at your numbers monthly. And one thing I like to tell people is, because we're in this digital age, the shoebox accounting doesn't work anymore, right? You can't collect receipts and then save them till the end of the year, because one, the receipts are not made the way they used to be made. They're going to fade within 3 days. You're not going to remember what that is. And then if you don't remember what that is, how are you going to get the benefit of that deduction? So I like to tell people, a little trick that I tell my clients is to get into the habit of scanning your receipts and creating an inbox, like an email that says receipts at the Savvy Accountant or bills at the Savvy Accountant. And once you scan it and you write down what that receipt is for, email it to that inbox, because now you're going to have like a digital file cabinet of all of those receipts that you're going to need. So all of your restaurant receipts, all of your vendor receipts, all of that's going to be in that email that you're easily going to be able to search for if you need the receipts. But you don't have to worry about if that receipt's going to fade, because now you have the picture of it. So keeping track of your expenses is a mistake that a lot of small business owners make, because, everybody's so concerned with what we're bringing in, and they're not so much concerned of what did you spend to generate that.
Yeah.
All those marketing dollars, all of those contractors that you hired, all of that is going to be an expense for the business that you want to make sure that you're tracking, because that's on you.
Do you recommend, because keeping up with the expenses is, to your point, extremely, extremely important. Is there a number of people that you recommend to only have access to money or spending? So like, do you feel like it should be only just like the CFO if you have a chief financial officer, or like just an accountant and CEO, or like the CEO and like their right hand person? Like, what do you recommend as far as who should be touching and keeping up with the money?
That is a really good question. And I do think that every business needs to make sure that they have practices in place that touch on that topic. Obviously, if you're a one-person show, it's going to just be you, but you want to make sure that you have controls in place that's going to monitor who's touching your money. So for my clients, all of our clients, we don't have access to, we don't pay their bills. We don't do anything that's touching their money. We reconcile their books. We have their financial reports, but we're not the ones responsible for anything that's going to be, we're going to pay this for you. We're going to pay that for you. We're going to tell you what needs to be paid. And then whoever on your staff is going to be responsible for paying it. But you want to make sure that there's that separation. The person that's going to be responsible for reporting your money you don't want that to be the same person that's actually touching your money. Because I want you to imagine the scenario where if I have access to your money, I can just report that, oh, we spent 10,000, but if I only spent 5,000, what's happening to the other 5,000? So you want it to be separation of duties where I say 10,000 was spent from your account. This is where it was spent, but it wasn't like I had no access to that 10,000. I'm just reporting on what I see that's happening in the bank account. So that's a really good question. You want to make sure that it's two different people that's having access to the money that's actually reporting on the money.
Thank you. Another question I feel like I get or I hear a lot when I'm in the rooms of like, especially newer entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to expenses, okay, they can file on taxes, is actually just that, like what expenses can and cannot be filed. So like, for example, some people are like, I file my gas, or if I'm on a business trip and I forget my tie and going to a conference, like, is that a business expense that I can, be able to file? So I do get a lot of questions, or I hear people often ask the questions, exactly what am I able to file on my tax as a business expense? Can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah. So what I like to tell people is if you can remember ordinary and necessary, if you can remember those two terms and say, is this ordinary and necessary for me to run my business? So any expense, and that's going to actually vary by industry. It's going to vary by your business, but is this expense that I paid for ordinary? Like, is it something that somebody in my industry is going to have to pay for? Is it necessary for me to run my business? And if I can say yes to those, then chances are you have a valid deduction and you're able to deduct it for your business. So you gave a couple of examples. You said gas. So is this gas that I'm paying for? Is this for me to ordinary necessarily do something in my business? Am I going to see a client? Am I doing that? And then when it comes to gas, that's a kind of a caveat, because you have your actual expenses and you have your standard deduction based on the mileage. So you want to make sure that you understand which one you're doing. A best habit that I tell my clients is to always keep the receipts so that it can be decided which one is the best for you. But that's something that you want to make sure. So anytime you're going on a business trip, all of those expenses that are going to be incurred on that business trip are going to most likely be valid business deductions because they're being incurred while you're away for business. So any purchases of meals, all of that, those are going to be deducted for your business travel. So if you can really answer the question, is this ordinary and necessary for me to run my business? Then those deductions are typically valid deductions for your business. And you have to imagine that it's going to differ. So if I'm a hairstylist versus an accountant, I'm not going to have the same deductions as my hairstylist, but her deductions aren't going to look like my deductions either.
Got it. Another one that I often hear, or people seem to ask a lot when it comes to business and taxes, is how often they should file. Now, some people are like, should I file quarterly? Is it due by the 15th, like my personal taxes? Like, can you kind of talk about how and when and the proper way of filing taxes for your business?
Yes, that's a great question. So a lot of times people hear the quarterly estimated payments and they think that that's actually like a filing requirement. And what that is, it's really a payment requirement. And so your annual, again, because we talked about different entity structures, so those are going to have different deadlines. But if we're talking about a single member LLC, so you're the only owner of your LLC, you have what we call, you're going to be filing your regular 1040. It's going to have a Schedule C that's attached to it. Then your tax deadline is going to be the same as your 1040. So it's going to be the 4/15 deadline. If you extend it, it's going to go to the October deadline. Estimated tax payments are different. So those aren't actually filing your tax return. Those are the estimated payments that you have to make every quarter. And I like to do parallels. So when you come from the world of an employee, your employer is actually submitting your tax payments every quarter. So the government works on an earn and pay system. So you earn income throughout the year, you got to pay taxes throughout the year. Most people think that the government is just collecting tax dollars at the end of the year when you file your tax return, but that's not actually how it's happening. So when you're an employee, your employer is taking those payroll taxes from you every paycheck, and they're actually submitting it every quarter. And so that's where the estimated quarterly taxes come in. Now that you're self-employed, you're on the flip side where your employer is not responsible for it. Now you're the one responsible. And so that's where the quarterly payments come in. It basically is saying you should be submitting quarterly payments for your taxes every quarter, even though the amount that you find out what you actually owe is at the end of the year. You should be submitting estimated quarterly payments throughout the year so that that earn and pay system is actually occurring throughout the year. So those deadlines really impact you. If you have a tax liability of $1,000 at the end of the year, then you should be submitting estimated quarterly tax payments. And every time I talk about estimated tax payments, I feel like I'm talking so fast and I don't know if people caught it, but that's essentially what estimated tax payments are.
File taxes only once,
Yes.
and
So you
that's
file your annual tax return, like in that April time period, but your estimated payments are what you send throughout the quarter.
got it. All right. Um, it was another question that completely just skipped my mind. That also, if anybody has a question who is in, please drop the question in the chat. We'll be happy to get those answered because I feel like especially small business owners is like you're juggling like 15 things,
Things. Yeah.
and it's like what you don't want to happen is like expenses, taxes to get away from you. So it's like that's the one thing
Yes.
to do right. Um, what is a hack? If you could talk to small entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs of color, because we a lot of times don't have the same resources, information. What's a hack that you would give to a small business owner, especially when it comes to expenses, money, taxes?
Yeah. So my biggest hack is always I said to be organized. I said to understand your numbers. I gave you the trick on how to keep track of all of your expenses. But my biggest hack is working with a trusted professional. And what that means is even if you don't have the funds to work with them on a continuous basis, at least setting up a consultation one time at the beginning of the year so that you have an idea of what your year should look like. I think that's going to be the biggest hack for you because you're going to be getting the information that you need from the professional that you need, and you're going to be able to know what you need to do. And so, what that looks like is obviously I'm going to be biased because I'm a CPA, but it needs to make sure that ask the right questions. Don't be afraid to say, well, do you work with my industry? Do you have a lot of clients that are in my industry? Do you understand the ins and outs of my industry? When you're looking for a professional to work with, don't be afraid to ask questions. I like to tell people all the time that while I know what I do is very important, it's not brain surgery, it's not rocket science. Nobody's dying from this decision that we make right now. Everything is figure outable when it comes to your taxes. So it's not something that I should not be, you shouldn't be working with a professional that tells you, oh, don't worry about that. I'll take care of that. You wouldn't understand that everything is able to be explained. You should be understanding everything that's happening when it comes to your taxes. So ask questions, make sure they're able to answer your questions in a way that you understand so that you're able to articulate what's going on when your business, because you are on the hook for all of this. So even if you're working with someone and they tell you, don't worry, I'll handle everything, you're responsible for what goes on your tax return and what's being reported. So don't be afraid to, interview them the same way that they should be interviewing you to see if you guys are a right fit for each other.
So for people who are seeing this now, see this later, and they're like, yes, that's great advice. Where do I even start? Like, how do you even search for a good professional to even ask those questions? Like, where should people start? Let me say, where should people start to look for that professional?
Yeah, so word of mouth works really good if you're on social media. But if you want to vet these professionals, you need to make sure that you go to either their state licensing board, or there's a website called cpaverify.org, and that basically connects all of the state agencies for CPAs, and you're able to see if the person is actually a true CPA, if they've had any dings against their license, because we are a regulatory body. Like, we are governed by state regulatories. We follow strict regulations. We have to abide by these rules, and you'll see all of that information for CPAs. So that's why you need to make sure that you're working with someone who is trusted, who is actually what they say they are. And so that's a way that you can verify if the CPA is actually valid or not, cpaverify.org. And I'm sure the same way you can do that with a lawyer is how you can do that with your CPA.
Got it. Is for someone who is saying, like, I'm just starting out, I'm bootstrapping myself, like, what would you say would be the cost or the average cost they would probably pay, even if it's just for a consultation to get started? They might not stick with that CPA throughout the year, but like you said, at least consult someone professional. Like, what price range should they be looking to say, to get started, I need X in this
Yeah.
someone?
So I think that that's going to vary by each practice. I know for us, we have a free consultation. So you're going to get your free call, and it's going to be a discovery call with someone on the team. It's going to be a 15-minute call for you to explain kind of your scenario. And then from there, the next call could be like, so we start at an hour. You'll get an hour with the CPA to go over your situation, to talk you through things. And that's going to start at the 600, 650 range. And that's going to be for the hour. You're going to get the deliverables sent to you for what we discuss, and you'll be able to ask some questions in that hour so that you know that you're going to walk away with tangibles on how your next step should be. So I think anywhere, between the 500 to 1,000 range for you to just have a discussion where you can walk through your questions and figure out kind of the next best steps.
Got it. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
30 minutes went by fast, as I feel
It
like it
did.
all. But you have been, this is amazing information. Thank you so much for all the gems that you did share with us. But for people who like to even personally reach out to you, who may have a question, of course, I know it's professional,
Mhm.
you'll have to go over to your professional side, but if they just want to just even reach out to ping you here or there for something, how can people reach you?
Yeah, so I'm the Savvy Accountant across social media. So you can send me a DM on Instagram here if you guys are watching this here. If you guys put comments, you can tag the Savvy Accountant, and I typically respond to DMs really quickly. I manage my own DM from the personal side, so if you send me a question, I will get back to you. And then we can see how we can work together. But the links are in my bio on how you can actually schedule a call. And like I said, you'll get that free call with someone on the team to figure out kind of the next best steps and how we can best work together.
Love it. Any last advice you want to give to small business owners out there?
Yes, I want to let you know that when it comes to taxes, I know that a lot of people get anxiety and they get nervous, but everything is figure outable. So even if you're dealing with the tax situation, if you got a tax notice and you don't know how to handle that, nine times out of 10, it's something that can be figured out, and you're probably just stressing because you don't know how to solve it. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be embarrassed when it comes to any tax issues or anything like that. I want people to understand that there are people who study these things. There are people who understand ways to get you out of your tax issues. So just make sure you reach out. If you're sitting on several notices, and that happens a lot, make sure you reach out because the notices won't go away. And so we want to make sure that we can get that tax issue solved.
Love it. Once again, thank you so much for taking time to join us on Culture Meets Money. All the information you gave was absolutely amazing. So for people who watch it now, people who will watch it later, I'm sure they will get just as much out of it. And for those who either once again join now or later, I appreciate you. Up until our next time for the next Culture Meets Money, you guys have a great one.
Bye. Thanks.